What do you see when you imagine the future? When we picture what's to come, we often think of innovations that take us to new heights. Some of them are already here, and every day, thousands more make the jump from our imagination into reality. Nowhere is this more evident than here in Japan. Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies are fundamentally transforming the way we do things. All this is happening so fast, and we must do more than just keep up. These emerging technologies open up boundless possibilities of what our future could look like. Technology is not a simple solution to our problems. It poses questions that we need to answer and guidelines we need to write together. That's why we're all here, a global event hosted by Japan that brings together the world's leading voices across disciplines and geographies. How technology will shape our tomorrow depends on the choices we make today, and that starts now.
Welcome everyone to this session on building trust into technology. I'm Catherine Cheney, a senior reporter at DevX, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this important session. So trust is likely to come up in most sessions at this week's Global Technology Governance Summit, as it's really foundational for digital, economic, and societal growth. This is a topic where progress is only possible through public-private partnerships, which is a focus of the World Economic Forum, of course. Yes, tech companies have a critical role to play when it comes to making their products more safe and secure, but while this is necessary, it is not sufficient. And today we're going to explore what else is needed to make tech trustworthy. In other words, even once technology is secure, how can we ensure responsible use? I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then I'll ask them to share their thoughts on this topic before we move into a conversation. And we really want it to be just that, a conversation. So for those of you joining us here in the session on Zoom and TopLink, I invite you to post your questions and stick with us following this open session for a discussion limited to World Economic Forum members and partners. So joining us to discuss what cybersecurity and governance practices can make existing and emerging tech more trustworthy is Norihiro Suzuki, Chief Technology Officer at Hitachi in Japan, our host, Jennifer Scanlon, President and Chief Executive Officer at UL, Wafé Ben Hassin, Principal for Responsible Technology at the Omidyar Network, and Tom Kohler, Global Head of the Citizen Developer Program at KPMG. So there's a distinction here, and this is what I'd like to hear from each of you on. It's not just about building trust into technology, but how we can ensure that tech is trustworthy. So I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you define trustworthiness in technology? And what are you or what is your organization doing to make tech more trustworthy? Norihiro, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Norihiro Suzuki, CTO of Hitachi Limited. So Hitachi is working on deliver social, environmental, and economic value through our social innovation business. So we are talking with partners in respective countries, holding discussions to resolve issues that need to be addressed on a global level, such as environment, safety and security, and to create a new value for society. The digital transformation that is currently taking place is occurring at an overwhelmingly faster pace than it had in the past. The trustworthiness of technology, human rights, environmental impact, such factors are deeply entwined with achieving the sustainable development goals. So, and of course, for Hitachi, so securing the reliability, the trustworthiness of technology is the crux of our business. To this end, so in the Hitachi R&D organization, we have been pursuing the activity such as cooperation with customers, drafting future visions, and policy recommendations with academia, and working with WFC4IR, so providing the necessary technology, ensuring its trustworthiness, and thus achieve our end goal of raising social, environmental, and economic value. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to returning to some of those topics as we move into conversation. But I'd like to go to Jennifer. So Norihiro was just mentioning this overwhelmingly fast pace, and I know that's something that your company is working to keep a pace with. So can you tell us, how do you view this issue of trustworthiness in technology?
Absolutely. And it's interesting for us at UL as we look at this pace, because we're a 127-year-old company, which means we've had 127 years of keeping up with the latest advances in technology and ensuring the safety of those modern technologies. 127 years ago, that technology was electricity. Today, it's the Internet of Things and cybersecurity. And when we think about it, I always have a phrase, which is, when technology is free, that means you are the product. And part of being that product means that as the one that's generating revenue for someone else, there can be unexpected aspects, both that harm your safety and security, but also that you just didn't even think about, and different rights that you might be giving up, certainly in privacy and other areas. And so as the global safety science leader, our focus with our customers is ensuring that we help them build trust with their customers in the areas where that trust could be at risk, both in those expected places and the unexpected places. And so really keeping up with that pace of, not just how secure is that product that's hooked to the Internet of Things, be it industrial or consumer, but also really thinking about what could go wrong and trying to stay a step ahead of that. And that is, I think, one of the most interesting and also difficult challenges of the pace that Mr. Suzuki mentioned.
Thank you, Jennifer. That framing, when technology is free, you are the product, is of course true. And I think the stakes are higher depending on the geography we're talking about. And that's something I know Wafe can speak to, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective, not just from your work currently with the Omidyar Network, but work you've done around the world on these topics. So Wafe, moving to you now, I'd love to hear, what is your view on, again, this distinction of not just building trust into technology, but ensuring that technology is trustworthy, worthy of trust?
So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Wafe bin Hassin, and I'm a principal at Omidyar Network. Omidyar Network proudly supports, fosters, and partners with a variety of different stakeholders that push forward this idea of responsible tech in a diversity of ways. I think now would be a good time to mention the very popular adage, with great power comes great responsibility. And as it stands today, we have great power, but unfortunately, those that hold the power exhibit very little responsibility. A responsible tech ecosystem would be one where business models incorporate benefits and impacts on society. It would be one where users can have ownership and control over their own data and derivatives of that data. And it's also one where the technology that people use is actually in their hands in a decentralized way. Trustworthy also implies that there's someone or some people that determine what the level of trust is that is put into that platform or technology, to determine how worthy is it. That's the worthy part of trustworthy. And in order to do this, we need to have researchers actually have better access to specific kinds of data sets and information while respecting the right to privacy. My work in particular focuses a lot on encrypted messaging platforms and some of the harms that could emanate from that use, of course, without undermining the right to privacy or even the security of encryption that it provides. But because measurement is still challenging in this space, individuals and researchers cannot easily trace different kinds of content that is harmful or even illegal in some cases. And so there needs to be select kinds of information that is made available to researchers, such as market sizes that's based on geography, how information travels, et cetera. And so we do need more evidence-based research to measure which approaches, if any, are more effective in countering harmful effects. That's the only way, one of the many ways, but it's a very important way to get to responsible tech, actually.
Thank you, and I hope we can return to encrypted messaging. As a reporter for DevX, I write a lot about how messaging and chatbots are being increasingly used in global health and other applications, which offers a lot of exciting potential, but also introduces risk, and trustworthiness is essential. So I hope we can return to that. Tom, I want to bring you into this. And in addition to your role with KPMG, which I mentioned, I know you're also one of the founders of the Munich Cybersecurity Conference. So you bring that view, that lens to this conversation. Can you tell us, what do you think about trustworthiness in technology? What do you hope to accomplish in our conversation today?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think it's one of the heaviest goal you can have, building trustworthiness in a very interconnected environment, interconnected infrastructure. I would say it's very clear that our core challenge is that we live now in a world of full technology that have spread out through society at incredible speed without always having considered the full extent of the impact or society or our security. So I guess that sometimes great ideas come with unintended consequences. So therefore, building trustworthiness into our highly interconnected and dynamic world requires at least three things, I believe. And first, I would say we should expand the dialogue from building trust into technology to build trust into processes of our interconnected systems of systems. So actually, I think we should trust the value chain perspective. And the second one is, I would suggest that to embed an enhanced standardization or standard way for risk-based assessments into the innovation management process, actually to facilitate on the one hand side the time to market, but without jeopardizing digital trust. So getting innovations up and running needs us to consider thoughtful all aspects of the customer journey, from ideation, design, and deliver to value realization and retirement. So it's not just the production. And third, I think what you mentioned already, Jennifer, some other recent research I have read has shown that citizens have concerns about new technology and sentiments around privacy. So we should explore more the mechanism that builds trust in a digital environment, like accountability, like privacy and security, and make more measurable and tangible to foster it like a competitive advantage.
Thank you, Tom. And I completely agree with your emphasis on risk-based assessments. And in preparing for this session, was reading just about how much this is going to cost, right? This will cost a lot, but the point that the cost of inaction is greater. And the stakes are very high, of course. I wanted to reference the Digital Trust Insight Survey from PwC, which I thought captured it well, saying that if the lifeblood of the digital economy is data, its heart is digital trust. So that's what we'll get into now. And Norihiro, I know each of you are working with the World Economic Forum, tackling different aspects of this trust in technology issue. But Norihiro, I want to go to you first because Hitachi has been working with the forum on a trust governance framework. And of course, we're talking about trust at this conference on technology governance. So can you tell us a little bit more about the trust governance framework and the role that governance specifically can play in nurturing trust in technology?
Thank you, Catherine. So a trust governance framework is proposed in the WF white paper. So rebuilding trust and governance toward the data-free flow with trust. The paper was a collaborative effort between the COIL Japan, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan, and the Hitachi. The framework provides the basis for discussion on the type of governance needed or desired to build up trust for the fourth industrial revolution, which promises new innovative business through digitalization and the use of technologies such as AI. On the other hand, there are concerns that need to be addressed, such as whether AI will truly operate as intended or not. These concerns need to be met and resolved to ensure that the technology is trustworthy and unnecessary concerns do not hinder innovation. In the white paper, we propose the evidence of trustworthiness need to be gathered, made available publicly for anyone to verify, and publicized to raise people's awareness. In the past, a legacy of achievement, years of operation, and brand experience form the implicit basis for trusting a given technology. Today, however, so as we undergo a new industrial revolution, we need to take another look at the components that really contribute to the trustworthiness of technology. Consolidate the evidence and ensure that it is accessible in a way that is visible and understandable to the person who will be using the technology, for the technology to be accepted by society as a whole. At Hitachi, so we are implementing AI in systems to operate on human-centric principles, but we believe that this is not enough. So we therefore took the initiative to draft and publish our own standards for handling AI and guiding principles for AI ethics. By showing that Hitachi's AI is implemented through such standards, we hope to gain society trust in our AI, and through similar initiative, contribute to securing the trustworthiness of other technologies. That is my contribution to this kind of the technology.
Thank you, Norihiro. And for those who are joining us through Zoom and Top Link, you can see in the chat that white paper is referenced. I want to go back to Jennifer now. Jennifer, when we talk about trust in technology and how that comes into our day-to-day lives, connected devices are increasingly part of our day-to-day lives as more and more of our lives have moved online over the past year. And I know you've been working with the World Economic Forum on its Trustworthy IoT initiative, focused on the Internet of Things and connected devices. So I'd love to understand your take on what are the particular challenges when it comes to trust and the Internet of Things, and how are we building trustworthy connected devices?
Absolutely. And we're thrilled to be part of the World Economics Forum's Trustworthy IoT Coalition. And I think there's probably 4 considerations that can help build this digital trust. And then later on, I want to come back to Mr. Suzuki's comments about creating standards. The first one is ensuring that we're incorporating a secure development lifecycle. You got to build it into the product design up front so that cybersecurity is there from day one rather than trying to bolt it on later. And so ensuring that organizations are thinking about what are the pieces they're putting together? Software that's being developed in-house, third-party, open source, and having, some set of standards that you're judging against, but also ensuring that that whole systems development lifecycle will continue to require improvements and ongoing change. And that's my second thought on this, is that it is a fluid and constantly changing process with acceleration and velocity. I mean, so it gets faster, and the pace that it's getting faster gets faster. So you have to be committed to that continuous improvement in that product life cycle. Once the products are out there in the market, just like software, you've got to have, the patches, the vulnerabilities, the updates, and the consumer has to have an understanding that they play a role in that, of making sure that that if they don't stay up to date, they're putting themselves at risk. So back to, one of Tom's comments earlier, what are some of those mechanisms? The third one is having a way for consumers to easily differentiate products. And so to know, that when you're choosing between 2 products, that this one has this security rating and this one has this security rating. And that requires, a coalition to come together to, have a set of standards and be able to judge against those. And we at UL are working very hard on that. And then finally, just collaboration and transparency in this whole process. There is never going to be a perfect system. And if there is, it won't be perfect tomorrow because someone will figure out how to crack into that. And so, one of the areas that is just so important is thinking through autonomous vehicles. When you think about the product that puts it all together, and it's not just the safety of that vehicle when it's first developed, but it's the safety and security of, you think about it, I was on another forum, the China Development Forum, and they talked about, autonomous vehicles are driving data centers. And so how do you have the security of a driving data center, not, just a car? And so I think it's exciting to think about these rapid changes, but it does start with just some basic blocking and tackling that I outlined.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I know you mentioned you wanted to build on something Norihiro said earlier, so we'll return to that in our conversation. If I can, I just want to make sure to bring in some of our other panelists, but I think you make a really good point. This conversation will continue. We're not going to say mission accomplished. The challenges will continue to evolve, and we'll need to continue to have conversations like this one, which is why I'm grateful the forum is bringing us all together. But I want to bring Wafaa into this. And, I'm based in California, where there are a lot of new positions branded as responsible technology. And that's good to see. And I wonder if you can just expand on what does it mean exactly for technology applications to be responsible? And how does that relate to how technology can be considered trustworthy? Why are we seeing these new roles, and what should they be doing?
Well, it's interesting that you said you're based in California, because part of the problem, I think, is a lot of the technology was developed by mostly white males who are based in California, and the technology is then deployed to the rest of the world, which of course having technology go to the rest of the world is wonderful, but that also carries certain values with it that do not incorporate the rest of the world. So I wanted to echo something that Jennifer mentioned earlier that is so critical, is that this is a fluid and constantly changing process, as you said. And it involves also a lot more than cybersecurity. I think what's really difficult to pin down nowadays is that we don't really understand tech's role and its relationship to society, to communities, to individuals, and especially as how it shifts across all three of those things. And so what we see sometimes with encrypted messaging, for instance, and the kinds of harms that emanate from that. So we have physical harms that can happen, institutional harms, we could have economic harms as well. Obviously, responsible tech, anything that's responsible would not lead to these kinds of harms that are either unintended or simply overlooked most of the times. But I did want to go through some of the harms that do occur. And that don't just occur in the global south, but also occur in the global north as well, because sometimes we often focus on what happened in India, for instance, the WhatsApp lynchings that happened in 2017 and 2018. We also have the swaying of the election in Brazil, which, misinformation spread rampantly on WhatsApp and other applications that led to a swayed election, in essence. We also had setting off of riots in Indonesia, which eventually led the government to block WhatsApp and Facebook, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. And other harms also include using TikTok in places like the United States to push misinformation on vaccines or on medical issues, which lead to very real physical harm. And so by the spreading of propaganda that usually happens through advertising or newsfeed curation to specific individuals that are targeted using their personal data, I think there are two main things that companies especially need to do in order to become more responsible. And hopefully those that do get those positions in California working on responsible tech take this to heart as well. But I think the first thing is that business models need to change radically. Currently, a lot of big tech's business models are extractive. They use personal data to further their own profits in a way that is completely irresponsible and that violates the human right to privacy and people's dignity, to be honest. And then I would say that the second thing is involving more researchers, civil society from global places, not just in the United States, to partake in the governance of these big technology companies. That goes beyond just forming working groups that eventually get blocked by executives or other kinds of arrangements. It's beyond just getting feedback. It's actually having users control and own and give feedback and input into how the technology is being deployed and used.
Now, I want to bring Tom into this because all of you are working on building trust into technology, but often the way that trust in technology enters the headlines is when cybersecurity is part of the problem. So it can also be part of the solution. So I want to hear from you, Tom. Where does cybersecurity fit into all of this? And again, this will be constantly evolving and we'll have to keep having these conversations, but where are we now and where do we head from here when it comes to cybersecurity and trustworthiness in tech?
Yeah, I would say you see already the cybersecurity market has grown incredibly over the last 5-10 years. It's by no doubt. But the question mark when it comes to trustworthiness, sometimes we have some conflict of interest. Yes, the one guys would like to have quick time to market, innovative, and the other side, of course, is what Norisho said is that you have the trustworthy building framework, and you have to go through this process. And this process usually are quite lengthy. There are a lot of controls in it. So you have security here, you have your privacy officer there, and sometimes the innovation is being then kind of like a lame duck. So from an investor point of view, there's a conflict of interest. They would like to get this solution quickly to the market. And I believe that why we have to have the trust by design embedded in this, also in the innovation management, not only in the design process later on. It should be a part of your innovation management upfront, because you need to consider this values in your framework from the beginning. Without that, of course, you will have later on more discussions, because why we're sitting here is actually the result of having not a good data governance, or maybe a highly automated data governance in place. Most of the stuff is being still dealt manually. We see this in capability globally in many firms. The data governance is really a beast there. It's a very complex, high complex task nowadays. So when now all the technology like AI and the connected Internet of Things coming together, you're playing with so many new layers of complexity that you need to rethink and step back for a moment and really think about the trustworthiness of your process. I think only then it's really possible to think about the impact and the ideas, what really matters, and where you really should start to invest when it comes to resilience or when it comes to trust.
Thanks, Tom. I see a question coming in on Q&A, and yes, we do encourage questions, so please include them if you're on the Zoom or on top link. And in just a few minutes here, we're going to close this open session, and those who are with us in the Zoom and top link can stick around for more of a conversation. But with just a few minutes left, I'd love to go back to each of you to either perhaps reflect on something one of your fellow panelists said. Jennifer, I think you wanted to respond to something Norihiro said. Or since we've all agreed that this is not, going to be a mission accomplished, we're done conversation at any point. We're going to continue to have this conversation. What's one thing you want to see change from this conversation to the next conversation you have on trust and technology? If we, let's say a year from now, have this conversation, what's one thing that could change? So actually, Jennifer, I'll start with you, and then perhaps we'll conclude with Norihiro. A minute or less, would you like to respond to any of your fellow panelists, or say one thing you want to see change in the next year?
Well, absolutely. I want to just commend Hitachi for publicizing their own standards that Mr. Suzuki mentioned, because I think that's a great start. But we would tell you, as 127 years of setting standards, the importance is having those standards harmonized and coming up with an industry approach to setting those standards, and then getting people to willingly adopt them. And this is something, and Wafa made a great point about culture in Silicon Valley, that Silicon Valley has fought tremendously, that they want us to believe that they can handle this themselves. And so that, my biggest message is that, and I think a great example of that is you think about Energy Star appliances. For years, EPA and Department of Energy promoted energy efficiency. It didn't get anywhere until Energy Star program was created. Standards were set, manufacturers created that market, and users started expecting those standards and those ratings. I think the same can be done here.
That's a great example. And Wafe, I see you have a thumbs up on Zoom, so you agree, but any reactions or another call to action for this group? What could change in the next year?
I actually wanted to echo what Jennifer said, and thank you for the space. But we keep talking about tech companies needing to change, and that implies that self-governance actually works. But we've seen where self-governance has led us. And this is why governments are important, and this is why governments all around the world need to develop adequate standards, as we've mentioned, but both Norihiro as well as Jennifer, and processes for navigating the online space. This includes methods to either curtail harmful information, as well as having standards around digital advertising, development and placement of advertising, mandating disclosure requirements, as I mentioned earlier, on how information travels, or about advertising as well, which is, I think, really at the heart of a lot of these issues. And so there's a really big role for governments to play, and we cannot overlook that. I think by overlooking that, we're doing society a really big disservice by insisting that this is a problem created by tech and that tech needs to solve. I think tech at its heart is business driven by definition. And so we need to acknowledge that and give the role and space necessary for governments to actually do something about it as well.
Yes, that's a powerful articulation of why this is a key issue for public-private partnerships. And I see Norihiro, you wanted to jump in on there, so I'll let Norihiro go, and then we'll close with Tom. Go ahead.
Actually, So mentioned that sort of the governance. So some people may think of technology as the accelerator and the governance as the brake on the innovation. But the truth of the matter is that they are two wheels on either side, so supporting the same innovation vehicle. So taking into consideration trust and governance from the design phase will accelerate the implementation, technology, or innovation in society. That is my comment.
Thank you. Tom, final thoughts from you before we conclude this part of the session and stay for further conversation.
Fully agree with that, what Miri shows said. I think in the new reality, innovation is both endless opportunity and relentless challenge. And what I would wish for the next dialogue is that we really moving forward with a risk-based discussion. So making clear that we have to have a better understanding and how to control technology, what risk-based management actually means. And the harmonization of standards is a must-have, because I think all the companies that we're talking to, I think they suffer because of the hundreds of thousands of controls they have to manage every day in their environment. So standardization and harmonization is key to make this more lean. And then, of course, hopefully we can have a quicker and faster time to market with new innovation without compromising actually the oversight and the responsibility.
Thank you, Tom. Much more to discuss, and I know some of you will be able to stick with us. So I'd like to go ahead and invite forum members and partners to stay on to continue the conversation. And you'll also hear from the World Economic Forum about ongoing work on this topic and opportunities for engagement. So we'll pause for a moment to transition from this live broadcast to the closed forum. And for those of you who are only sticking with us up until this point, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to our panelists for a fascinating conversation.